In this video, we're going to take our selections a step further and refine them with select and mask. So all of our selection tools here have the select and mask options. I can go up here, and it just might be in a slightly different spot, but it's with all of them. For this practice, I'm using the image face, and I'm going to use the quick selection tool. And my goal is to make a good selection of the lips, and then I'm going to just change their color. But we'll also talk about making them as their own selection, as you might want to do for your Create Something New project. So with this tool, I want to go up to the options bar and make sure I'm on the correct option. So I'm on the regular selection, not like the add or the take away, which I'll use in a second. And I'm going to click and drag around. And the size of the brush that I use, so I can use those left and right square bracket keys to change the size of this tool, it will affect like how quickly it makes selections and how much it grabs. Okay, so I'm going to kind of just go and grab along here, and if I take too much, I'm going to switch to my take away tool and kind of try to soften this, the bottom of the lip a little bit. And I have to take away the inside of the mouth, so I'm going to make my brush pretty small. And try to take that away. And if I really wanted to spend some more time on it, I would go and touch this up a little bit more. But as even in the next video, we're going to talk about even more techniques to touch up this initial selection. All right, so now that I have a selection, incidentally, to point out this tool and also the magic wand tool, I don't have the feather option up here like I did for the other tools I was showing in the last video. If I right-clicked, I could get to feather. Or I can also go up to select and mask. So I'm going to click on that. And this is a pretty cool little feature of Photoshop. So let's start talking right from the beginning here about the view mode. I have mine so that it's on white. Yours may be looking like it's on onion skin. So click on this and you can take a moment to explore what the different viewing modes are. Basically, we have these modes that allow us to see our selection a little bit better so that we can work on them. I'm going to choose the on white, but something I already had set up because this is how I always work. Yours probably has an opacity of 100%. So after you choose your mode, so I'm on white, then click outside, and then you can lower that opacity. So I find it helpful to have my selection isolated, but also to be able to see a little bit of my background here. So we're going to talk about these tools over a couple of different images. So first, to notice that I have the feather option here, so if I wanted to add a tiny feather to kind of soften the edges, I could. But what I wanted to point out in this video is the smooth option. So I can smooth the edges of my selection. I'm going to really move it up, and you can see what's happening here with the bottom of her lip. I'll take that away, bring it back down. You can see how it's kind of choppy to bringing it up. And I'm getting a lot smoother of an edge here. And that's pretty much what I wanted for this selection. Just to point out also, let's say I wanted actually to get her whole face and everything but the lips. I could invert my selection. And now this is what would be selected and not her lips. But I do want the lips, so I'm going to go back and grab the invert. And once you're done setting this up, so again, I've just worked with the smooth and I give it a tiny feather, hit OK. And now I have my selection, Control J. I'm going to bring that selection onto another layer. And just for the sake of example, I'm going to make it a color adjustment such as color balance. And I'll make her lips a little bit redder and warmer, just so we can see how the selection is indeed like really soft on the edges. And I'm not getting, if I had just used like my polygonal and I had hard edges, you'd really be able to see the difference between the area that was edited with color and the area that wasn't. So that's a pretty cool feature to be able to work with. All right, and now I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to get one of her fingers and talk about some of those other options that were under Select and Mask. So I'm going to make a selection of her finger, and I'm going to kind of on purpose like take a little bit more than I need to. And then I also want to show you how you can save selections and then load them later on. So I'm just kind of going around, taking a little bit more than I need to, and almost done here. So obviously I'm working very quickly with these selections to try to make these videos short. I would expect you guys to be working a lot slower and really zoomed in. So let's say I made my selection, I spent a long time on it, and then I needed to go. So what can I do? I can save my selection. Under Select, I'm going to choose Save Select, and I'm going to call it Finger. Click OK. Control D to get rid of my selection. You could pretend I closed this image, closed Photoshop, opened up everything again, and it's going to be here. I go to Select, Load Selection, and under the channel here, I'm looking for Finger. So I had already done this, so that's why I have two fingers. And it loads it again, which is pretty awesome. So I want to make sure I'm on my background layer, and I'm going to go up to Select and Mask. And I'm going to leave it on my white at 72%. That's fine. So what I want to talk about this time is the Shift Edge. If I move the Shift Edge to the right, it's expanding. It's taking more pixels than I had in my original selection. And if I move it to the left, it's cutting down my selection. So again, this is about where I was, and now I'm I'm taking away from my selection. So this can be really useful. So between that and now I'm going to smooth it, I can get a much better selection here. So contrast is if I want to create a sharper edge, so kind of the opposite of feather. And again, the only result I'm seeing in this one is kind of just like it's taking away from it a little bit. I don't really want to have a sharper edge. I want the edge to be softer. So once I'm satisfied with that, I can click OK, and then Control J, put that onto its own layer. And again, if I need to touch it up any more at this stage, I'd probably just zoom in and take the eraser tool. If there are any couple of little parts that are still dark and I want to get rid of, I would just go and erase them, going around the edges. Okay, so I now have, I'm going to zoom out here. All right, take my Move tool. So now I have a couple of different selections here, and what I want you to start thinking about is how you can take these selections and put them together to create a new image. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the Edit Transform options. So we've gone over how we could rotate our canvas under Image Rotation, but now just briefly to go over, I believe I did this last week as well, so this might be a review, but going over rotating or transforming individual layers. So under Edit, Transform, I have a lot of different options, such as I could just flip this horizontally, and I'm going to do Control J to duplicate this layer and then move it out, and then I'll go back under Edit, Transform, and flip this one horizontally as well. Okay, I can go under Edit, Transform, Scale, and I could scale this smaller. So the rules with scaling is you want to grab one of the corners and you want to hold the Shift key down, so that way you're locking proportions. So if I grab from the side, even if I'm holding the Shift, I distort my image. So we want to avoid that. I don't like that, so I'm going to cancel. You can also get to that bounding box with Control T. So I'm holding the Shift key down. That was the same as if I went to Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm rescaling and making this smaller. And hit the check mark. And now maybe I want that finger to be behind the other finger, so I'm moving it behind, and I could duplicate it multiple times. I just keep doing Control J and then moving it along. Okay, so just a couple of review things about Edit Transform, but if you haven't already been working here, Edit Transform, Scale, Rotate, Skew, Distort, Perspective, Warp, Flip, Horizontal, so on and so forth. If you haven't looked at these areas, please do look at these in addition to refining your selections. All right, so we have just one more section to go over, which is creating your quick mask mode.